Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very well. Today we are going to be answering a question that often comes up that people get in their heads, and it doesn't matter whether you've been in business 2 weeks or whether you've been in business 15 years. Often this question comes up. How do I know if my business is going to work? How do you know if that's going to happen? This is a question that I think people secretly think and struggle with and have to battle with, and it's tough, right? But I have some answers and I have some thoughts for you to dive into and for you to think about when this comes up. So, when you're at a point where you're like, right, is this going to work? For some of you, that is because you've never made any money online before, right? So that's fine. That's like a valid feeling. But I also think there's a huge chunk of people who are in my audience who are listening to this, who it's like you've made lots of money. You're on the outside doing really well, but inside it might not feel that way. Operationally, it might feel like the inside behind the scenes part of your business is kind of falling apart. It might be that it feels just very distant and you're like, oh my goodness, this just all feels really confusing and just like, is it actually going to work? Or it's like financially you're 10 years in and you still haven't yet, you're not taking out consistently every single month an amount of money that feels really positive to you and feels like, yeah, I can actually like sustain my dream lifestyle with this. So we're going to have a really open conversation about this, and hopefully you will leave with some things to think about and maybe even a task or two to execute and to do. So when you are thinking about how to know if your business is going to work, one of the biggest questions I ask people is, and this one's a tough one, you've got to really be honest with this, right? Do you believe that your business is going to work? Deep down, on a core level, do you believe that your business is going to work? And listen to what that says. If that's a yes, great. If it's a no, okay, that's fine. And then I need you to think about, what is that emotion coming from? So you've tuned into this episode and potentially you've had a really stressful day, potentially you've had a really good day. You've come at it from different, you maybe start on your day and this is the first thing you're listening to, or maybe you've had the day from hell. Just do an emotional check-in with yourself and be like, okay, where am I at right now? And what came up when I answered that question? Do you believe that your business is going to work? The reason I ask that question is because that ultimately guides your behavior and your action taken subconsciously. And so, regardless of what's happening strategically, in terms of your belief system, that's a guiding force. So that's guiding you one way or another. So you're either thinking, yeah, I do believe it'll work. I know it's going to work. I just haven't figured out how I'm going to get there yet. Or I haven't got a clear plan yet. Or it's something deep down telling me that this is not going to work and I've been chasing after this for years and it just feels like something's just not right. Both of those are valid. You might feel something that I haven't described and that's totally fine too. But getting a real grip on how do you feel about that is really important. The other question that's really important to think about is, how much self-belief do you have? So what do you believe in yourself? Do you feel capable? Do you feel like, that you're really positive about that? Or do you have doubt? Do you have this feeling of like, I don't think I'm coming out for this, or people like me don't do stuff like this, or like, do I have what it takes? I don't know. That might be something that's in your head. And that's a really important question, because the self-belief piece is really where, it comes into its own, right? Because it's like self-belief. Okay, well, what is it about the self-belief stuff that really is a problem for you? Because one thing I know will be true is that you can cultivate self-belief in yourself and you can learn that. It's a skill set. Because that was something I really struggled with years ago. I really, really found that hard. And I have worked really hard on changing that. So self-belief, you can kind of work on. The first question of, do you believe that your business is going to work? I argue that that's like an instinctive feeling. Now, it's not that that doesn't change, because I very much think it does change month to month or week to week. That's what I've seen from people. But that is a very interesting kind of, the belief bit, I believe, comes from clarity, which again, some people are going to be like, really? So in my opinion, the more clarity you have, the more belief you have in something that you know it's going to work or it's not going to work. Because the clarity fuels and kind of aids this certainness. Probably making words up, but like certainness. It's kind of, you're like, it breeds a sense of understanding. And so you then have a place of making a decision of like, oh, right, that makes sense or that doesn't. And so thinking about that, going back to your question, do you believe that your business is going to work? I then want you to say, are you really clear on your next steps? Are you really clear on your growth plan? Are you really clear on where you're going in the next 6 months? Do you know what your action is for the next 3 weeks? If the answer is, no, I don't think my business is going to work, and no, I don't know what my action plan is, or no, I'm not sure what my growth steps are, or no, I don't know what I'm doing for the next 3 weeks, that makes sense, right? Because there's going to be a lack of clarity. You don't know what you're doing. Therefore, it's quite normal to feel like, I don't know if it's going to work. There's another camp of people who are like, no, I don't know. I don't believe it's going to work. But yes, I still have the plan. That's a different conversation and a different kind of set of circumstances to be grappling with. But for most people, it's like, I don't believe that it's going to work, but then they also don't have a plan. And that in itself makes the feelings worse because they kind of eat into each other and they're both like playing off against each other. So when you think about self-belief, coming back to self-belief and how much self-belief do you have, I want you to think about, how have you cultivated self-belief in yourself in the past? Where have you shown to yourself of like, yeah, you know, I can do that, or I have done that, or that was really hard, but I have done it? Because if you can start mastering the idea of self-belief and understanding that you're in somewhat control of that, then you will start to be able to switch how you're viewing situations that will really help when it comes to these pangs of like, is my business going to work? And like, I don't know, is your business going to work? And you feel really lost. Now, when we look at the other side of this, is this word called trust. And I want to ask you, do you trust yourself? Because trust and self-belief and business all have a kind of place with each other, and they all sit within each other. So do you trust yourself? Because a lot of people don't know what that means for themselves. And so that's where the sticking block is. That's where the thing that doesn't make sense is, because they're like, I do know what I need to do, but I don't believe that the business is going to work because I don't trust myself. And so the trust piece becomes really important there. And so having a think about, right, yeah, trust. Let me think about that. Do you trust yourself? Or do you have a narrative in your head of, I am not good with money. I spend money. I can't save money. Or I'm reckless. Or I'm this or I'm that. That's a negative thing that would then add to this idea of not trusting yourself. Because if that is a connection point you have, then that's going to really impact this idea of self-belief. I hope this makes sense. I feel like it's frustrating that I can't talk to you. I can't talk to you through the screen, which is a bit annoying. Then, from that point, I need you to then start thinking about, where do you need to grow as a person? So we all have areas that we can improve on. We all have areas of growth. Let's identify them. What are they? And get really clear on that for yourself. Like, what are the areas that I need to grow? And that can be personally, and it can be in the business. And then the next point from that is for you to start thinking about, how are you actually going to grow? Who is going to help you? Because a lot of this stuff that you will have written down is stuff that you can kind of solve. I don't want to say solve because that's not the right word, but progress with and move forward with by doing, by taking action, by failing, by trying. And this is where I think is a massive gap between people whose businesses work and they make it work versus people's who don't, and then the business doesn't work and it fails. I don't like the word fails, but, doesn't give them what they want. That is a really interesting piece, yeah? Where do you need to grow? How are you going to grow? Who's going to help you get there? So, that might be a coach, a consultant, an advisor. It might be a support system. It might be a team member. Like, who is going to help you? I am that for a lot of people. My role, I slot into clients' businesses and I really help them with this. It's not that they're hiring me to help them have more self-belief. It's that over the work we do together and over the time we spend together, that then increases because as a byproduct of some deep work that we're doing elsewhere. And I think that's a really interesting conversation to delve into, because it's like, okay, yeah, how do I know if this business is going to work? Well, massively that's down to you, because any business that's ever been started and that succeeds has come from one person or multiple people taking action, believing in it, and then just keeping on going when it doesn't look like it's really doing much. That is a reality, and that has happened for people. So you have to kind of work out in your head, okay, well, I am a one-person band, or maybe you have a co-founder, but I'm this single person. So what is my self-belief like? What is my self-trust like? Where do I need to grow? And how am I going to do that? And in that conversation, you will find a lot of really deep key areas that will help with your development. Now, what I'm talking about here is an element of self-leadership, is an element of your emotional intelligence and how you hold yourself. And the reason I don't call the episode that or kind of label it as that is because that just becomes a kind of section that you just slot things into. And I don't really like that. I want you to think about it more from a perspective of, how do you know if your business is going to work? Because if that is in your head and that is the question that you're mulling over in your brain, then all of the things that I've been asking you in the questions really apply to your professional and personal development. So my next question is, how do you let yourself down? Because often when we're unsure about is the business going to work or not, some of that comes down to the fact that we don't follow through with what we say we're going to do, or we give ourselves too much to do. So some people I work with are doing loads of stuff, but they're doing it at the wrong time, or they're doing it at the wrong part, or it's not strategically aligned, or they're just kind of trying to do far too much at one go. Where do you let yourself down? Think about that and list out the things. And then think about how many times in a week do you say you're going to do something and you don't do it? Or you set an intention to complete X amount of things in a day and you only get 3 done. Because the real key thing here is that the more you tell your brain, right, we're doing this brain today, and then at the end of the day you haven't done it, that is knocking points off against you, and your brain uses it to kind of mess with your head. It uses it against you, and it's like, well, you didn't do that. So then when you're sat there thinking, is the business going to work? How do I know if it's going to work? Your brain's like, well, it probably won't do because we're going to do this yesterday and you haven't done it. So yeah, it's probably going to fail. And that's difficult, yeah? That's really hard because it's not necessarily true, but your brain is telling you that. And it's telling you that because your brain likes to look for evidence, and the evidence is suggesting to it that you aren't following through. So then it's like, well, why on earth would the business work? Why should we believe that it's going to work if on a Monday afternoon we haven't managed to do X, Y, and Z thing? Please note that I'm telling you this and talking through a thought process. I am not saying this is true. I'm just saying this is what can happen when people do this kind of work and think about this stuff. So what is the solution to that? The solution is that you stop saying you're going to do stuff that you're not going to do. And you stop just purposely shooting yourself in the foot for no reason. So you're going to slow down. And you're going to start keeping your word. And you're going to set small and meaningful things to do that you can actually commit to. And you start betting on yourself. And you start leading yourself. And you watch, if you follow what I'm about to tell you to do, watch your self-belief grow. watch your trust increase in yourself. Because you can trust yourself because you're like, yeah, I did this and I said I was going to do it and now I have. So that's great, isn't it? I'm trustworthy. You will start believing a lot more in everything you do, but also your business. And the reason I say this is because I've done this. I have sat and I have done the work for this and I have been around the ringer with it, and it's tough. But I'm also here to say that it's possible and this really, really works. So the task is, you do one thing a day. So you're going to pick one thing that you do. If you're already quite good and quite productive, pick 3. But pick one if you've got, if you're really in a chronic state of I have no clue what's going on here, just pick one. You then can do that action, and then each week you can add more items if you'd like to. So say you pick one thing to commit to doing a day, and it doesn't have to be the same thing every day. It's like one item off your to-do list, for example. It doesn't have to be a habit. Then you do that for a week. The next week, you're going to add 2, add one thing on. So you'll have a total of 2. And you do that for another week. And if you can, you add 3 on. Now, at the point you've got 3 going, I suggest that you keep it at 3 and you keep going, and you don't need to keep adding 4, 5, 6, 7, because that then becomes, difficult to manage. But 3 a day is a really great set of things to do. So what you then do is you keep your word and you do what you've wrote down or whatever you've said. So the 1 thing, the 2 things, the 3 things, and you do them. And when you start doing that, you'll be amazed at how much your productivity increases, how much your procrastination decreases, how much you really feel into this idea of yeah, do you know what? I can do this and I am doing it. And the key thing with this is when you commit to doing this, you're doing it, right? So if you haven't done your one thing and it's 11 o'clock at night, you're going to do it. And this is why I'm saying this is not I'm not saying hustle and do, this is quite an extreme. Well, it's arguable, right? It's not an extreme thing because you need to sort this out in your life full stop. But then it is arguably a bit extreme because I'm suggesting to you to do it at 11 o'clock if you haven't done it, right? Depends which thing, how you look at it. But what I'm saying to you is if you commit to doing 1 thing or 2 things or 3 things, and if you are an overachiever, don't just pick 3 things because you're listen to this, yeah, I'll just go and jump straight to 3 things. Start at 1 thing. Do 1 thing for a week, then do 2 things, then do 3 things. If you are sat and it's 11 o'clock and you haven't done that thing, you've got to go and do it. There's no excuses, right? You've got to go and do it because this is about building self-belief. It's about trusting yourself and building this solid backbone in you. And this is one of the easiest activities you can do to support yourself with it without it being overly extreme, because honestly, some of the things I could suggest that you do are rather extreme. So this is an easy one. It's simple to do. You can totally do it. Do it on a morning and then your task's done. But you need to go through this process and commit to doing it for at least a month, and then report back to me and be yeah, this really helped, or no, it didn't, or oh, I'm interested. It did something, it didn't. This will, if you do this consistently for years and years, like I have, will honestly instill so much trust in yourself and so much self-belief because you're going to do things. And it starts helping your brain shift from, I don't know if this is going to work, or I have absolutely no self-belief, to, yeah, why not? This could work. This could happen. This might be really good. And so if that is the case, really lean into this episode and lean into what I'm suggesting and go for it. Now, from a practical perspective, because I know this is quite mindset heavy and it's quite intangible, some of it, how to know if your business is going to work, I just want to leave on this point. Your business model needs to make sense. If your business model doesn't make sense, then potentially your business might not work. And what I mean by that is, do you have a clear value proposition? Do you have a clear offer? Do you know what you're selling? Do you have a clear market? Do you? I don't know. You need to tell me. Hopefully you do. That all needs to be in place in order for your business to work. Obviously, there's some businesses in the world that just randomly succeed for no reason and are quite bizarre, and you're oh, that was interesting. But for most people, you need to have those things in place. And you also have got to have the self-determination, you've got to have the self-belief, and you've got to have the grit to be able to see it out and do it. Now, that is hard to do on your own. I appreciate that. You can come and work with me and I can support you. What we've talked about today in terms of self-belief and understanding growth and understanding how do you trust yourself, that is all stuff that I will support you with and that you will grow into as we work together. So if you want to come and work one-on-one with me, you can. If you're really dedicated to this and you're like, do you know what? I've been doing this for 5 years. I've got to make this work now. Or I've been doing this for 15 years. It's time to like really rev it up a notch and actually be able to get out of it what I want to. Come and have a conversation with me, because we can work together for 6 months and that can really shift things for you. It can really, we can open your eyes to seeing a different possibility of what's possible, of what might happen. But we can also really look at what feels good for you and what do you want to do every day and how do you want to feel every day and how can you know deep down that your business is going to work, because that is possible to feel that all the time. I mean, there may be like one day out of a year that you don't, but like you can have that real innate feeling and it doesn't have to feel every month that you're like, I just don't know if this is going to work or not. Because there are many things you can do to stop that being the case. And so when you invest, let's just talk about investing in your growth. So if you're sat now thinking, right, well, yeah, maybe I do want to work with May, or I don't know, maybe I want to work with someone else, but I want to kind of look at this as a piece of work. When you invest in your growth, that in itself is an interesting proposition, right? Because you're then like, oh, your brain's like, okay, you're spending money or you're giving your time. When people say invest, it's not just about the money. It's about your time commitment. It's about you carving out space to commit to doing a certain thing. And so, that investment process of saying, yeah, I do want to work with Mayo. I do want to do this and I am going to go all in. It's like your brain starts to think like, oh, okay, you're really serious about this. And that often can be enough for people to then kind of really get on the journey of this self-belief thing, because when you start working with me, it's like you then realize, okay, yes, success is a non-negotiable. Like it's gonna happen. Providing that you're prepared to put the work in. And that is a really interesting thing, yeah? So people who come and work one-on-one with me, one of the things they find is that it's like this, they come into my world and they realize like, whoa, okay, May's like, success going to happen, like progress is going to be made, it's going to happen regardless. All it depends on is how fast you want to move and how willing you are to keep going, even when it's really hard and you don't like what I'm saying, or you don't like me, or you don't, it's really challenging and you're being really tested, because that will happen. But that is a massive shift for people. And they come into that space and they're like, whoa, this is really cool, because I now see that like, this is a non-negotiable. It is going to happen. I can do this, providing obviously that you're prepared to put the work in. And so that's a really interesting thing to think about as well, of like, if you've made investments in the past and they haven't worked out in the way you'd hoped to, that might have affected your ability to trust yourself, because you're like, I trusted myself to do this. I made a financial commitment. I made a time commitment and it didn't pay off. And so some people can hang on to that for so, so long. And I really just want to put a big love letter and a hug out to you and say, listen, you can move on from that. That doesn't have to be what you hold on to forever and ever. It's holding you back. It's not helping your business. It's probably stopping you from, making more money and growing, because you're subconsciously just rejecting things or pushing things away that could be opportunities. Growth is okay. It's okay to do some things that were great and do some things that weren't great. It's okay. That's fine. But it's probably time for you to move on, and it's probably time to get really focused and to be like, yeah, do you know what? This is going to work and I am going to make it happen. And now is my time to create the business I want on my terms in a way that suits me. And you can have that. How cool is that? That's amazing. Like, you can do whatever you want to do and make it work and make the money you want to make and have the time, the free time, the kind of expansive periods of time for you to dream and to think big. And that's cool. So if you want to continue that conversation and you are feeling really pulled and you're like, oh my goodness, I need to do this, reach out. You can come and speak to me on Instagram at may.james_ is my username on Instagram. And yeah, there's an application form which you can fill in if you wish to, which you can find on my website, which is www.mayjames.com, if you want to complete an application. But if you want to speak to me beforehand, that is fine, and you can come and chat to me. But that is all for this week. And I just want to leave you with one thing, that is, your business can work. Providing you've got a solid strategy and you're prepared to put in the work and you're prepared to stay focused, your business can work. So just keep focused, yeah? get the support you need, get the things in place that you need, and then go for it. Because you deserve to have the dream business that you have in your head and that you've worked hard for. You probably put a lot of hours in up until this point. It's now time for you to like tip over into the fun part and into the bit of like, oh my goodness, yeah, this is really cool. This is working. This is really nice. You deserve that. I'll speak to you next week. Tune in then. Bye.